What's up, everybody? Welcome to Cooper Stuff. This is a very special episode because I have my daughter, Alexandria. It's going to be perfect, right? You think it's going to be the best episode ever because you're on it?
Absolutely. Without a doubt.
That's the way it goes. We're going to jump into a special episode right here on Cooper Stuff. Cooper Stuff! Hey everybody, welcome back to Cooper Stuff. Some of you guys out there are just like me. You've got little ones like this that might not even be all that little anymore. And you're probably thinking, I need to prepare for the future. What can I do to get my assets in order? Because the world has gone absolutely nuts. And who knows what kind of world we're going to give to these people here. Because we're printing money like it. We can just keep doing it forever and ever and ever. But guess what? What that means is that your money is not going to be worth as much, which you already are seeing now in inflation. You might want to do what I do, which is to put a little bit of your retirement funds into precious metals, all right, gold and silver. I do that with my friends at SD Bullion. They are a Christian company. They're passionate about training parents just like you, actually people of all ages just like you, in your financial future, explaining what inflation is and explaining why precious metals retain their value even during these crazy fluctuation times. And I like it because you get to hold it, and I love the taste of it, the smell of it. Anyway, it's pretty cool because you get to hold it. You never know what's going to happen. It's always good to have at your house. So if you're interested, text the word Cooper to 465-322. That spells gold 22. We make it easy here because I'm a simple kind of guy. And they're going to send you a free brochure. They're going to text you some information. Or if you say, no, I want to get started, I want to spend 50 or 60 bucks, get a silver coin or something like that, all you got to do is text Cooper to 465-322. They're going to give you a discount on your first product. Do it now. Go check it out. And now we're about to get started into a sweet episode of Cooper Stuff. So you're finally on my podcast.
It's about time. Coop and Mini Coop.
Yeah, we could call this Mini Cooper Stuff. No, it's good to have you on. What I thought would be cool, why don't we start with you telling people who you are, what you're up to, and then I want to ask you some questions, namely about college, about what it's like to share your faith at college, the things people are going through. I want it for people who are entering into college so they can be prepared. You know, they can build themselves up spiritually so they're ready for what the enemy may bring, but also for evangelism. And then a third aspect of this will be good for parents. There's a lot of people watching that are, have kids and they're concerned. And I want to get to that. So we'll tell everybody who you are, what you do, why you're here.
All right, great. Well, my name's Alex. I graduated high school in 2020, and then I did the Living Light School Worship for 2 years. So it was like a discipleship program. They kind of equip you to go out. And now I'm in college in a UW school that's near here, so I don't have to leave. And I'm an English major.
You graduated high school during the lockdown?
Yeah, that was interesting.
You get to walk across the TV room to accept your graduation.
Granted, I guess I was going to do that anyways, but yeah.
Yes, true. Yeah, exactly. All right, so you're entering into college a little bit older than some because you took 2 years off, basically.
Yeah.
But still, you're 20, And some people might not know. It's not fair to say I was not trying to persuade you not to go to college. But I'm sort of like, I don't like the idea that everybody has to go to college. That's not my thing. I have some concerns. Did you feel that I was trying to persuade you not to, or was I just leaving it open?
No, it actually was nice to have the freedom to not have to go if I didn't want to, and it was kind of something that I felt free to just pray about on my own and decide. Which the only reason I did go was because I did feel like it was the Lord. Obviously for English, for editing, you don't necessarily need a degree, but I did feel like it was the Lord to be there, so I actually felt like the freedom to decide on my own.
So did you have any concerns going into school to do with the culture? What's it going to be like being a Christian? In other words, did you go in with your eyes open, or is it a little bit like, oh my gosh, I had no idea for what things would be like?
I think because of you and Mom, I felt really prepared to go into a college setting, which was really good. And obviously thanks to teachers in the school that I went to as well, I didn't feel blindsided by really by anything. At this point, I haven't felt blindsided by anything, which is really good. But I was aware that every day was going to be either a fight or a very serious conversation with some people who are like, who really want to hear what you have to say and are really open-minded. So it has been interesting. It's the people that push, and then it's the people that are like, well, what do you think about, are people born bad, and why do you think that? So I did feel like I had to be prepared going into it with arguments, and I'm glad that I was.
I see what you mean. You mean born bad, like meaning like, are we born? No, are we born like with goodness and we're just all good people, or are we born into sin? That's what you mean by that, right? Yeah, got it. Yeah, because that changes kind of. And so, is it the case? Speaking of that you found, is it the case that the general feeling with other students would be that humans are good or born good and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I was definitely in the minority when I answered with, "Of course, we're born bad,"
Right.
which I wasn't necessarily expecting that one. But yeah, I think most people think you're a good person, and there's not exactly truth out there. So I'm kind of in the minority, no matter how I respond, even if it's like an open-minded conversation. Even if it's like a simple, kind of like a simple question like that, not even straight up like, "Do you agree that everyone can be gay or lesbian," whatever it is, even if it's not like a direct attack, it does feel like, oh, I really have to think about what I think from a biblical perspective and know how to defend it, even in a normal conversation.
Let me ask you this then. So you knew there was going to be a lot of things going into school. You knew you needed to be prepared and whatnot. Has it been? And of course, like, being that we live together, we've talked about a lot of. So you've seen a lot of these things on TV. Probably is the case that a lot of students don't know some of the campus crazy, the cray stuff. They probably didn't know that going in. But even with you knowing that going in, I actually don't even know the answer to this. In other words, are there a lot of things that surprise you still, even though you knew that? Or is it kind of like, yeah, it's crazy, but I was prepared for most of it?
I think overall I felt prepared, but it is kind of weird, especially because Kenosha is not like a big city. It's kind of, Kenowhere. I don't know how
You
much.
say Kenowhere?
Yeah, that's what people call Kenosha.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, hashtag Kenowhere. Anyways, because it's like.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know why, but there were some things that I have seen on campus that I just wasn't expecting to see in what I would consider not a big city, if that makes sense. Like, oh, maybe that doesn't touch Kenosha, but I mean, it's pretty normal to see like Planned Parenthood booths in the hallway, like walking to and from school, or I pass furries sometimes. So I think there were things that were surprising, but at least they weren't like, oh, I've never even heard of that being a thing, if that makes sense.
What is furries? You pass furries. Explain that. People might not know what you mean.
Furries are people who identify as cats, I think. So they like dress up like cats. I've never actually talked to one, so I don't know. I don't I don't totally know what it is, but if you pass someone dressed as a cat, then it's their identity.
Right. So it's sort of like trans, but not to do with gender, to do with almost like species almost.
Yeah.
Ish.
Yeah. From my understanding, yeah.
All right. All right. So let me ask you this. When you went to school, did they have like an orientation? Did they give you things like speech codes or rules to follow, things you're not allowed to do? Well, obviously, I know the things you're not allowed to do, that we would be clear, but meaning mostly to do with like speech or how you interact
Right.
with furries, for instance.
They didn't say anything specific, like these are the things not to say, but they did really hammer home, like you have to be kind to people, no being hateful, you have to be respectful. And they talked a lot about LGBTQ, the resource center that we have on campus, and a lot about diversity, a lot about like religious minorities, but like specifically not Christian. So like if you're Muslim, you can go talk to the like religious resource people. But yeah, I think it definitely came up a lot, but they didn't specifically say what not to say. I think we all kind of just agreed we're on the same page because we're good people. That's more what it felt like to me, of like, oh, we're good people, so we love people and we include everyone, be inclusive, be welcoming, that kind of stuff.
That's interesting. So you would say in the rubric of sort of social justice or inclusivity kind of a thing is an important aspect of orientation. Even if they didn't say speech codes, you can't you can't misgender someone. If you misgender someone, you're kicked out of school. It's not that kind of thing. It's more a certain set of rules that they kind of assume people know when they say we have to be inclusive, and LGBTQ is a major part of this, and anti-racism or whatever. All of that is probably within the rubric.
Yeah, they did talk about pronouns as well. Now that you've said that, I kind of forgot, but they had us like fill out this kind of survey. So like this is your race, your gender, your pronouns, your major. So in trying to get to the more serious information, there was the background of tell us your sexuality and your gender and like your preferred name, that kind of stuff. So they do definitely make it a very big deal. It's just not as blunt as here's what you do and don't say, at least right now. But you absolutely can get reported, and there are special like coaches that you can go to talk to make sure you're not, experiencing hate speech from your teachers or students.
I see. So if that occurs, then somebody reports something, and then they begin to handle measures there instead of coming down on the front end with a hardcore rule book of don't misgender people, don't say this or this and that sort of that makes sense. Okay, so. I want to ask a couple questions. What is it like then? Because a lot of people watching Cooper stuff are probably my age. We have kids and whatnot. The world's changed a lot in 20 years since we went to school, or even 10 years. Some people watching them might be in the 30s. They have young kids. A lot's changed in 10 years. So I think that sometimes we think it's probably kind of normal for there to be a mixture, and probably a lot of people that have Judeo-Christian values, and then some people that don't. Is that true, or is it leaning more towards like, okay, the Christian worldview is definitely putting you on the outside? In other words, are Christians now more like the minorities at your particular school?
That's a hard question because most of the people who go to Parkside, there are a lot of like Catholic or Lutheran churches in Kenosha. So most people that I've talked to would have like grown up kind of going to church, and they would say they're Christians, but they're really not. And most of their worldview is not either. But they've been to church a little bit.
So they might say they were, I'm religious, or maybe they would even say I'm Christian, but their worldview would be similar maybe to people who are not Christians who are also at the school. So in other words, they would be joining force. If you had to say, which team are you on this issue, they might join up with the other side.
Every time. Yeah,
every time
I would think every time. Okay. I definitely think it's weird. I have 2 friends that sit with me at lunch, and we're kind of the only 3 that I've talked to, like really, who hold to biblical truths, like even in the classroom or in a conversation with people. But most people would say they're spiritual. That's okay to say, like especially if you're like into witchcraft and that kind of stuff.
Yes, yeah, New Age, witchcraft.
Yes. Like you can be into Jesus and into that. That would be fine.
And witchcraft.
Yes. That would be fine.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
Don't really go together, but okay.
Yes. So in other words, what we might be saying, and what I think probably a lot of older, I don't mean older, I mean parents. What a lot of parents of college students might not understand, even if their kids grew up in a Christian home. So people watching, they're Christians, their kids grew up in a Christian home, and sometimes they go to college and they're wondering, why did my kid get so weird? A lot of what they don't understand is that there is a lot of synthesis happening between Christian religious beliefs, spiritual beliefs, and other kinds of spiritual beliefs. They don't see that it's a problem to say we're going to mix Christianity in with bits of witchcraft or New Age or whatever that may be. And we mix them together, social justice perhaps, and we create something that's kind of new, which is kind of an acceptable Christianity with the culture.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting. So does that make it hard to share Jesus with people because you would like to have some definition like, oh, you're a Christian, cool. Now, what does that mean for you? Does it make it difficult?
Right. It's not... Yes, if you're going to stick really hard to the truth, then yes, no one wants to hear that. If you're going to be like, hey, I believe in Jesus and I love you, that's no one really cares. They're like, yeah, cool, Jesus is cool, I love you too. So I guess it kind of depends on what you're trying to communicate. Like I was talking to a girl a couple months ago who grew up in church and knew the Bible pretty well, actually. And I just met her, and suddenly she was like, so how can God be all-knowing and all good? Because the Bible says he's both. And so we were having this conversation about God, and after a while, I kind of realized I don't think she actually is a Christian, but I think she knows some of what she's talking about. So I ended up asking her, like, do you think that Jesus is the only way to God? And she was like, no, obviously not. Good people don't go to hell. And I was like, okay, well, just to be clear, that's actually not what the Bible says. And if you believe that, you might believe in Jesus, but you're not a Christian. And she was kind of like, oh, I mean, I guess you're right, but I think a lot of people would be like, yeah, I'm okay with the good parts of Jesus, but not with the truth part if it applies to me. I don't know if that makes sense.
I'm into the good part of Jesus, but not the truth part.
Yeah.
I love it. It's actually, we all know what you mean. Yeah. In other words, they like what they consider to be nice.
Yeah.
And if they said, I could create an ideal Jesus, and the Jesus of the Bible has some stuff like that I'm kind of into.
Yes.
But they're not into the idea of Jesus being the way, the exclusive way to heaven, the Savior, the life. Okay. All right. That's an interesting point of view. So in preparing, let me ask you this, because I think some parents are going to want to know. What did you find it helpful to do to prepare yourself in order to go to college?
I have a couple answers, so I'll try to be fast. But
No, hit me. We got lots of time. This is Cooper's stuff. Cooper's with an S at the end, plural.
Let's go. I think the first thing was resolving in my head that this was the truth. Like, I talked to a lot of people in class or teachers or students who are like a couple years ahead of me, and they're like, yeah, I came into it where college is where you're figuring out what you believe. And that was kind of the first red flag that I experienced really fast was, no, I'm not figuring out what I believe. I know what I believe, and I'm going into the world ready to defend what I believe.
Can I interrupt? Do you mean, were some of these people Christian people?
Well, I don't know. I think, yes, they would claim to be Christians. I don't really know.
No, I understand. So there's people that they may claim to be Christians, but they're looking at colleges where you really do your real thinking and learn, as opposed to knowing what you believe as you go in. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
That's interesting and scary.
Yeah. I had a conversation with a teacher and some students where the teacher had said, hey, I know you're religious and I'm sorry if what I said offended you. And I was like, oh, I'm not offended. I'm just listening, whatever. And these other students overheard and were basically like, oh, it's going to get so much more confusing if you think this class is hard to think about, when you're really figuring out what you believe about, gay people and the world. And I mean, I'm a progressive Christian, so I'm just telling you, it gets a lot harder to figure out what you believe. And I was kind of like, no, it doesn't, because I know what I believe from the Bible. So I think like resolving in your head that I'm not here to figure this out. I'm here to just live out what I know is true. And even when you feel like, oh, someone's asking me a hard question and I've never had to think about this before, it's like not to think, oh, I must be the one in the wrong because they've thought about it, but like I'm going to go back to the Bible or talk to church leaders or parents or people that you trust and just be determined not to let go of things you think even when it's challenged.
That's interesting. So would people, like, for instance, in your classes, even maybe people who claim to be Christians, like, for instance, would they be appalled at like, say, a pro-life position? Like if you're like, yeah, I'm anti-abortion in every case, would that be viewed as something that would be shocking even to some of the people claiming to be Christians?
I don't know. I think that one's a little more clear, at least with Christians that I've talked to, but I haven't straight up asked. Okay. We do have like a Christian group on campus where I don't know where people are at, but when the Planned Parenthood booth started coming in, they were sending pictures like, this is so horrifying, and everyone was agreeing. So as far as I know, I haven't seen that yet, but there are people who come from a Christian worldview who would now say, I really don't know what I believe, so maybe this is good, maybe this is bad, I don't really know. So I guess depending how far down you are in the line of thinking about what you believe, then I don't know how they would respond.
All right, so sometimes parents, I just want to ask you a question based on what you just said. So sometimes parents, or even churches, I don't think I'm crazy in thinking this, even though sometimes it's hard to make these generalizations about churches, but I don't think I'm nuts. I think that they don't like the idea of creating intellectual frameworks for Christianity. All right, so they don't like that because they feel like, maybe a good way to say this is they feel like Christianity is faith. It's not about intellect. This is just a faith. So you accept it, and so you don't have to have an intellectual framework, and so therefore we don't train people to have intellectual answers.
Yeah.
So they go to college and they go, man, you think this is bad, it's going to get a lot worse. Like your friend said, once you get in the higher classes and they're really hammering you, and I don't even know what those issues are, but I'll say some of the things that come to my mind would be postmodernism, questioning truth, things like standpoint theory. Well, the truth depends on where you stand in life based on your race, color, gender, sex, etc. Evolution, Darwin's evolution, all these various things. because we're not teaching people an intellectual framework and worldview for answers for those, then people go into only armed with, well, I just believe in God. It doesn't have to touch my intellect.
Yeah.
Do you think
Yeah.
that some of that maybe happens?
Yeah, for sure. And I think non-Christians know that as well, because every non-Christian that I've talked to has been pretty ready to like I think they actually feel confident they could take down my worldview and are really surprised when I have a smart answer or an intellectual answer for them on things.
Okay.
It's actually been a little bit of a shock to people, I think. So, I mean, in my English class, we talked a ton about postmodernism, and we have a couple people in the class who would say they're Christians, and the question was, what is love? And it took the class a long time to answer. And then the next question was, so what, is adultery okay if it's love?
Ah.
So now the Christians don't know how to respond because we all disagreed on what love is, and love is good. So if they're feeling love, then really is it okay? And pretty much what the class decided was, well, she probably should have left her husband before she cheated on him, but I guess if it's love, it's okay. And I was like, no, so anyways, I think non-Christians know sometimes too when their answer is going to be surprising or startling to a Christian. But we do need to know the intellectual answers because they're going to come up. Especially, I mean, for me, I'm getting an English degree, so that's a lot of philosophy and literature. So, like, that's more of a liberal art, I guess, is what I'm saying. So, especially depending on who you are, it's not enough now to just say, I know that love is good. You just have to know more of what the Bible says, and you have to go deeper or you're not going to stand.
That is interesting. I was reading. I haven't told you this. We're just having a conversation. People, in case they think we planned all this out. But I was reading a great sermon from Spurgeon, and he was talking about how in the Bible, I'm pretty sure it's the Apostle Paul, right, that says that the gospel is wisdom and power. Mm-hmm. So he's saying it's power and wisdom, and basically what you have is the Jews who wanted to see works, right? They want signs and wonders. Show me a sign and wonder so I know that you are the Christ, right? So they're demanding the power of God as their proof. The Greeks, of course, they want intellectual proof. They want a system of thought. And Paul, I'm pretty sure it's the Apostle Paul, is saying, well, the gospel is both of these things. The gospel comes in power. It's not just an intellectual system that we've intellectual truth propositions that are better than your truth propositions. The gospel of Christ is power, but it is wisdom as well. And I think that we kind of made this disconnect. And I can appreciate that a lot of Christians say, hey, I don't believe in God because it's some intellectual system. I believe in God because he gave me a gift of faith. So we all recognize that's where regeneration begins.
Yeah.
God gives us a gift of faith, and we begin to believe that the Word of God is true. But it doesn't mean that there's no intellectual basis for Christianity.
Yeah.
And so you're saying that was helpful going. Now, what would you say there was a practical answer to it? So you said, I want to go in knowing what I believe, but how did you know what you believe? What are some practical resources? Or is there something you say, this is helpful, or something you're going through now that you think is helpful that could solidify some of the young people watching this so they know what they're about to get into?
I think, well, first of all, I did come out of 2 years of a Bible school, so that was really helpful because I was really solid by the end of Foundations. But I think
Pressure is on.
Like, it's not enough to know, oh, that is just bad, like, because my pastor says it's bad, or that's good because it is. Like, when you're encountering sin all the time, you're going to get kind of numb to it, and it's going to seem okay the more you see it. So it's not enough to just think, oh, that's bad, so I won't do it. But you have to replace it with the truth of God's word as well. You know what I mean? Like, you have to know the way that he set things up. So I think if you trust, like, your church leaders or your parents, getting resources from them is a really good thing. Or even for a practical level, like, I mean, you're going to hear all kinds of things from all kinds of people every day. So I like listening to podcasts, like, when I'm in the car, whether that's about, like, the Bible or whether that's, like, even, like, Daily Wire, like, listening to things that I know are going to help me combat things in my normal life. You know what I mean? So before I go into that situation, I'm getting washed in things that I would be like, all right, this is truth, or this is, like, more what I believe is closer to biblically accurate, than I'm going to hear in my day. So, I mean, I watch, like, the Bible Project videos They're like 10, maybe 10 minutes, like at their longest. So I like them because they really unpack the Bible. But yeah, even getting like resources from your church leaders or people you trust, I think would be really good. And just being sure to make time to study it, make time to listen to things, even when it seems like it's not important, because it actually is going to be the most important thing going in, how you're seeing the world.
I see. So what I feel like I'm hearing is that there's two different ways right now that I think a lot of young people are being told how they should deal with this. One, which I think is what you're saying, is get rooted in truth, get rooted in the Word of God from, from a standpoint of faith and the power of God. And from and I don't mean hyper intellectual, but in other words, there are answers for these things. There are intellectual answers for the faith that are reasonable and rational, because it's not like God's irrational, right? God's not unreasonable. And hold to those things, and be unwilling to waver.
Yeah.
But the other side is what I think I'm hearing much louder these days from the church, which makes me nervous, and I think it's different than what you're saying, is Christians need to stop being so dogmatic about what they believe, be willing to listen to other people's stories, and understand they're coming from a different place. And in order to unify, don't be so dogmatic about what you think. I keep hearing that everywhere, and that makes me really nervous. And it sounds like your advice is the opposite of that. Your advice is no, you need to know what you believe. Otherwise, things are going to get confusing pretty quickly.
Yes. And even if you feel like by not saying anything we're unified, we're absolutely not. And the world assumes we're unified, which is the danger of it. Like, most people who talk to me assume right away that I'm okay with people being in the LGBTQ community. Most people instantly assume. They no longer think, oh, Christians, like they think it's a sin to be gay. No one actually that I've talked to thinks that anymore. They'll just say things to me like, obviously we're on the same page that. And every now and then I'm like, no, we're really not, because I love you enough to tell you the truth. And I don't want to be unified with the world when the world is against God. That's actually not, that's not smart. And we can't really pretend to be unified. That's fake. That's mean to people. Yeah,
so obviously what you're dealing with is absolutely, I love people who have all sorts of sin in their life, people that don't know Christ. We're not judging them because we are not the judge of them, whether that is whatever the issue is. We're not picking on a particular kind of people, but the pressure for the church to conform to the world's standards is so great right now that it does seem like, from talking to you, talking to other people that I know who are in college, that there's an assumption that even if you're a Christian, you probably kind of have already, you've probably already compromised on these issues because that's where the world is at. You agree with that?
Yeah.
They kind of assume that. All right. So what would you say to parents? A lot of parents watch, and they're nervous about their kids. I'm nervous about I'm nervous about you going to college. You know that, right? I shouldn't say I'm nervous because I know you and I know you're ready for it. But it's not like I'm like super duper. I can't wait because I know what's happening.
Yeah.
So for parents that are watching, they're saying, I'm kind of nervous about my kid going. What would you encourage them to do?
That's a good question. Sorry, I had a thought. Can I go back to what we were just
talking
about real fast?
Girl.
I think another thing to think about is Christians who barely know the Bible are trying to tell other Christians how they should agree with the world based on the things that they barely know, which I think is really dangerous too. Sorry, just a side point. Like, if you don't know what you're talking about, other Christians are going to be saying, well, of course they're right, because, you know, if you really love a woman, of course you'd let her get an abortion, because we have to love women. We have to know their stories. Or, of course you'd allow this. So, sorry, just to say, other Christians, in a way, might be not on your side. So it definitely feels weird being in like I know that I'm solid in what the Bible says. I know I'm not conforming, but it's really weird that it's other Christians that have swallowed it as well. Wow. It's not just
that is really interesting. So in other words, what can happen is you have Christians who we would call maybe Orthodox or more like in line with traditional historic faith. Sometimes that group of Christians doesn't always start yelling about the things they believe, right? They're not like, whatever. I don't know whatever that may be. A lot of the times it's starting to seem like the more vocal Christians are the ones that are not in line with historic faith, which is what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they don't exactly know what the Bible says deeply about a lot of things, but they are very quick to proselytize, to preach, to try to get you to conform to their. Is that accurate? You
Yeah.
find that they're kind of quite loud.
Yeah, which is really frustrating because then Christians who actually really do know the Bible are often quiet about it because, I mean, in that situation, I'd never know what to say because it's just me in a room full of, like, Christians or non-Christians who are like, well, if God was really loving, he wouldn't send people to hell, And I'm like, I don't know what God you're worshiping, but it's not mine. So I just think, yes, for sure.
Wow. Okay. All right. Interesting stuff. All right. I mean, obviously, I see some of these things, but it's fascinating talking to a college student. All right. What do parents need to know? What do you do? I'm sending my kid to school. I'm kind of freaked out. How do I prepare them for what is going to happen at school?
I think the best thing to do is to make sure foundationally they know the Bible well. Not even just like, okay, you went to Sunday school, so you know that God died for you. Like, of course they know Jesus died for you. Cool. But even things that you wouldn't think would be attacked, like, does Jesus send people to hell? I mean, I thought that was pretty basic, like heaven and hell. I thought that was kind of a basic conversation, but apparently there are people that are really confused and don't take the Bible very seriously. I think that's part of it. So like making sure foundations are definitely there, one. But two, I think it's really important to know what's going on in the world, especially because like the Bible talks about how basically we become who we hang around, like who our closest friends are. We're going to start like becoming like them. And you're like pretty much drowning in a world that disagrees with everything you have to say and doesn't want to hear it and will try as hard as it can to make you just like them. So I think knowing the lies that are attacking kids now to learn how to prepare them with what the Bible says back. Because most days, I think I said this earlier, but most days, even if it's not in your face, like obviously we agree with this. Don't you agree with this? If it's not that, then it's like I had a kid turn to me in class one time. We had a couple minutes of discussion, and he just turned to me and was like, so, do you think people are born bad? Why or why not? And I was like, cool. So anyways, I was talking, but it was funny because from across the room, someone was like, just so you know, what you're saying would be really offensive to a lot of people. And I was kind of like, well, you asked my opinion. So even if it's not direct
she said
attack.
That to you.
Yeah. Like even if it's not direct attack, people will want to know what you have to say. And you can't. I mean, it's okay to say when you don't know. I'm not saying you have to know everything,
Of
but
course.
you should be expecting that people are going to ask you, so you're okay with me being gay, correct? Things like that. That you're like, all right, I have to, or like you're okay with abortion. Like people are going to just start asking you questions, especially depending on what kind of class you're in. So being prepared to handle the culture's attacks.
So, it sounds to me like, and I mean, I see this everywhere, but would you agree? It's not just that people are saying, hey, I disagree with you. I don't like your ideas. It sounds like they really believe that their worldview is more just.
Oh, yeah.
Meaning they're looking at you and they're saying, it's not just that I don't like what you're saying or it offends me. Like when I was in college, you talked to a bunch of dudes who the goal of their life was to have sex with as many people as they possibly could. They didn't think that was necessarily righteous or just. It was just like, it's fun. It was hedonism. It was just a celebration of pleasure. It wasn't like, this makes me a good person because I believe in free sex, right? What you're dealing with is different. It sounds like what they're saying is, our version is actually a more righteous world. It's a fairer world. This is the good way to live. What you're saying is that's just offensive to people. So like I would offend my friends by saying, I know you want to sleep around with everybody. I know that, but you do know that's sin. Like the law of God does not allow you to do that. It's offensive to the Lord, right? And they would get upset with me because I don't want to be told what to do. Your situation, they get upset with you because they believe that God of the Bible, as you understand him and as we understand him, is a mean God.
Yeah.
That's kind of what you're saying, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I think on top of that, it's like we want to celebrate being open-minded and listening to everyone and respecting everyone's beliefs, but they actually don't want to hear yours because your belief is there's no other God besides mine too. You know, like I actually do, like I know the truth. And I think truth in itself is offensive to people because it's kind of universally assumed you're a good person when you agree with all the right things. And if you don't, you're a bad person, which is ironic because it's inclusive to everyone except for people who don't agree with them.
You're saying the concept of truth, meaning
That's offensive.
eternal truth or objective truth that does not change, that in itself is maybe offensive is too hard a word, but they push that. They don't like that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Because what they want is, we might call it, I don't know, pluralism or something, but those are the words. But what they want is, I don't mind hearing your ideas, Alex, as long as you're not saying it has to be true for everyone. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
But they also don't like your ideas.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it really proves a point that we say in apologetics. I say it on Cooper stuff all the time. You will have a God of the system. Everybody will have a God of the system, right? So even if they say, oh, I don't choose one belief, or everybody's entitled, everybody's opinions are just as equal, unless you're a racist.
Yeah.
Unless you're this, unless you're whatever. Now, of course, we believe because of Christianity that racism is wrong. But the point is if everybody's opinions are equal and nothing can be absolutely wrong, then why can't somebody be a white supremacist KKK member or something like? Why do you have this idea that racism is absolutely wrong, but nothing else is absolutely wrong? It doesn't make sense. Now,
No,
we
it
believe
doesn't.
racism is wrong because of the Bible, of course, in case anybody's going to tweet that I said that. But what you're actually coming into, and tell me if you agree, it sounds like this is a lesson on Christian worldview. There will be a God, no matter what anybody says. They will create a new system. So if they say, I don't believe in the Ten Commandments, they will create a Ten Commandments of their own.
Yeah.
Thou shalt not be a racist. Thou shalt love abortion.
Yeah.
Thou shalt believe that, whatever it is, that furries are actually born that way. And we have to acknowledge they are actually cats. You're right. They're going to have a new set of Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
So once more, you will either serve God or you will reject God and you will replace him with a new God. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So parents, we need to give our kids foundational truths, right? And we don't, would you agree that some parents, if somebody said this to me 5 years ago, I wouldn't have believed it. But you tell me if you agree. If you had said to me 5 years ago that Christian parents should not assume their kids believe in the most foundational, lowest level stuff of Christianity.
Yes.
They should not assume that. Or is that what you're saying?
No, don't assume that.
Like you mentioned the existence of hell, for instance. So you think that that's something that it seems like some of the people who say they're Christians, they don't have that a foundational understanding. Or
Yes.
that Christ is the exclusive way to heaven.
Yes. I think kids are being bombarded with a lot more than, honestly, some things like I come into contact with every day. I just don't know how to respond to still, but there are kids that are going through all those same things in different ways. So like a couple years ago, I took out a girl from my church and we were having coffee and she was 10 and she had said there was a kid in her class who she grew up with. His name is Max. Now he's Maxine. What does she call Maxine? And I was like, why don't you ask your mom? And she said, my mom said to ask you. And I was like, oh my gosh. And she was like, well, is Maxine, is it a boy or a girl? I don't know what to say, and I don't know how to interact with this person. So even in 10-year-old kids' classrooms, this was a couple years ago as well, there are kids who are transgender, and Christian kids don't know. I just really think they don't know what to do, especially because it's coming at them all the time. Like things as foundational as, are you born with the same gender? I don't think they're even going to know.
They don't understand that.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say my opinion on this, and I don't know if I'm right, but I think I am. As always. I think a lot of young people who were born in Christian homes, they don't know the answers to these questions, not just because their parents haven't taught them, which is an issue. I kind of think the parents don't know the answers to these questions either.
Me too, yeah.
I don't think they've thought about them. I think they are absolutely convinced, parents, that these aren't real issues. Yeah, we see
Yeah.
these on the news maybe every now and again, but that's like, I think they think you're cherry picking the weirdest cray stuff we saw on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's really dealing with this. So rather than have a foundational theological discussion, I'm just not going to deal with it and my kids will be fine. That's a mistake.
Yes.
You agree that, in
Oh,
other words,
yeah.
this isn't just happening in New York City or LA. This is happening in nowhere.
To nowhere.
Right here in the middle of nowhere,
Yeah.
Wisconsin. And so you're like, no, this is happening at all places.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm a volunteer with our youth group, so I work with middle school girls, like 6th to 8th grade, and I get questions from them all the time about culture things that I'm still surprised, even though I see it every day. I'm surprised that 12-year-olds who grew up in church need to know if it's really, like, is God so mean that he wouldn't let women have abortions? And I'm like, oh, didn't
Right.
expect that question. But yeah, I think especially if it's happening in nowhere, it's happening other places, and kids do have questions. For sure.
Interesting. All right. So one more question. Can you think of anything that you would say has been helpful ways for you to evangelize? So what are some good conversations that you've had? You may want to share one, or I don't know if you want to or not. Either that good conversation, maybe how that happened, and so it's a helpful tip of, because of the situation, I'm finding this to be a good way to show people I love them.
Mm-hmm.
Because I disagree with their worldview. Doesn't mean I don't actually love them. I do love them.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to convince people right now that if you don't affirm whatever they believe, if you don't affirm abortion, for instance, in the 3rd trimester, then they go, oh, so you hate women or something, you know? Obviously, you are a
Right.
woman. I don't think you hate women. Do you hate women?
Nope.
Why are you so mean? You give people the sads. So you want to convince them, no, I do love you. Just because I don't affirm that doesn't mean. So are there positive things that you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, I think because of the circles that I'm in, like, I don't know how this is for other people who go to Parkside. Like, I have a friend who's majoring in music and one who's majoring in, like, biochem. So I don't know how it is in other classes, but mine are a lot of deep thinking classes, if that makes sense. So, like, the circles of people that I talk to are typically people who've taken philosophy of religion, or, like, psychology, English, like, more of the kind of classes where you have to think about a lot of things. And I've found that they're really open right away to talking, but they're even more open if you are kind at first. So, not to, like, affirm things, but if you're kind initially, they'll know if it's genuine, if you really care about them. If they come in with a bad attitude, you're like, hey, are you okay? Can I do something to help you? You know, like, if you're just a good friend at first, I found they're a lot more receptive to hearing what you have to say. And because they've experienced you caring for them, they're not going to instantly assume, oh, you don't care for women because you believe that, because I know that I'm cared for by you. I don't know if that makes sense, but I've found that to be helpful. And also, like, listening to what someone has to say before I come in swinging, because I'd pretty happily be like, I don't agree with that or that or that or that, but I think there is wisdom in picking the battle as well, and especially when it's about the gospel, not coming in swinging with, look at all the things you just said that were wrong that I, like, think is disgusting that you believe, which, not that we would purposely come across that way, but I've found that usually I listen first and I try to figure out where the person's coming from. So, like, the girl I'd talked to about the Bible, she had said, I know God is all knowing and all good, but I just don't know how that works. But then it was later on in the conversation of hearing all the things she was thinking about that I realized I think she's just struggling with Jesus being the one. You know what I mean? Like, with this being the one actual right thing. And I think it's right because I grew up with it, but I really don't know. So I've been able to have a lot of good conversations with people, like, not coming in swinging, but picking when I jump in, and them knowing I care about them first usually helps.
I think that's good, because what I think is very difficult about the culture right now is that you have these two things going on. You have relationships, and part of what you're saying is it's relational. Not coming in with a sword ready to the sword of truth. Hi, I'm Alex. You know, and you're devastating the room. What you're saying is hey, these are people I go to school with every day. Let's have a relationship. We don't have to agree on things, right? You know,
Yeah.
to be friends. And you're listening in those conversations. And I still believe the best way to do evangelism is through relationships. It's through
Yeah.
showing people that you love them. The hard thing about culture right now is that because we have social media, everything is about signaling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in other words, whatever I believe, I go on social media, Instagram, BLM, I'm signaling that I love this one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone else feels the need to anti-signal. Well, I'm going to anti-signal what you said because that's not actually true. And you're being, and some people are being forced to signal things.
Yeah.
Like I just saw this week, or by the time this airs, a couple of weeks ago on the NHL. The NHL, the National Hockey League, is having their Pride Night, and so all the players in this team all have to wear LGBT bands, Pride bands. And one of the guys is Russian Orthodox, and he just said, I can't do that. I love everybody, but you're forcing me to say something that I don't believe is my religious conviction. And so now it seems like he's, quote, signaling.
Right,
he's making a big deal about a thing. He's swinging a sword, but he's being forced to. So we live in a culture that is very signaling or anti-signaling. It's performative, but really the best way to win people for the gospel is relationships. It's showing people that you love them, and I think that's part of what you're saying.
Yes, for sure. And obviously not being afraid to speak at the right times, too. Like, I don't want to make it sound like I'm saying, don't come in swinging, but don't be shy necessarily with the sword either.
I don't think you sound like that. I think you're saying, I'm here, I'm listening to them. I'm not jumping on every little thing they say. I'm saying, what's at the heart of this issue? And I think that's important.
Yeah. Like, I have a friend who we've had lunch together through tons of the semester, and he's not a Christian, but was raised, went to a Christian private school, was raised very much around Christians. But he definitely doesn't, he believes in a God. Eventually I did find this out. Maybe there's something out there, but he doesn't care about me. And my strategy was mainly okay, I'm going to poke holes in that, because if he cared enough to create you, then it makes no sense that he would leave. Picking the time to jump in with okay, I think that's the heart of the issue. You actually do need to know that if there's a God, then he does care about you. And that's logical. So that's why I'm coming in right now rather than a couple minutes ago when, you're talking about lots of different things that I also definitely don't agree with.
Yes, those are fruit. The other things he said are just fruit of the vine, basically, of his worldview.
Yeah.
And we don't need to start picking all the fruit. We go, all right, what's at the root of this? At the root of this is the concept that maybe there's a God that designed the world and he created me. He just let it happen. He doesn't care about now. You're directly in a conversation that leads to the greatest news.
Right. Yeah.
God knows your name. He knows who you are. That he formed you together in your mother's womb. He chose your eye color and your hair color. He knows your name. This is almost too good to believe. But that's the God of the Bible, which is amazing, right? Okay, so as we're finishing here, tell people where they can find you on Instagram, and tell them what you do on Instagram if they're looking for a little encouragement, or especially if people watching, by the way, if they're college age, high school age, whatever, or if you have a college age student, if you're watching, that might be a good place for people to direct, because you do tiny little things to encourage people on your pages.
Yeah, I do it's this series that I've just called Saturday, Coffee Conversations with Alex. So every week I just talk a little bit about mainly something that God's been speaking to me about through the week. Right now I'm kind of in a series on holiness. So it's mainly just to encourage and equip people as they're walking with God, especially since social media is just flooded with lies. So it makes sense to just start putting things out there okay, well, I'm pursuing God. I hope there are more people out there, if you're trying and you're getting swallowed in the untruths. The goal would be for it to be a helpful place for people to go, feel like they're not alone, and feel okay, let's actually talk about really practically what does it look like every day to follow God? Even if it looks like, okay, I'm not a missionary, but I do my homework on time and I clean the dishes, things that seem it seems not spiritual, but it is foundationally spiritual, and obeying God and listening for him and reading the Bible and just being serious about what we believe.
What and where is that?
That's at Alexandria C. Cooper.
Alexandria C. Cooper. Is
yes.
that right? And they're short, just so people know what they're getting into. In other words,
a minute and a half.
it's 90 seconds. It's a little bit of encouragement. I think that young people like those bite-sized things because you don't have to go and listen to an entire podcast where I just rant over and over and over and over. And that's a good thing to do. And so after this, what are you doing? You going back to college? Are you going to crush?
That's the plan, yep. Into psychology next. So
All
we'll
right.
see how those conversations go.
Well, I'm so glad that you got to join me on Cooper stuff here, and I hope it encouraged a lot of people out there. And say bye.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for watching.
Hope you guys have a great week. Go live for Jesus this week. Peace.
Read the Bible.